The Legend of Zelda has no shortage of iconic items and weaponry at Link's disposal. From the simple, like bombs and arrows, to the more mystical and spells and magical musical instruments. None, however, are as legendary or iconic as the Blade of Evil's Bane itself, the Master Sword. Its powers and abilities seem to shift slightly with each iteration in some way or another, but it's always the weapon of choice for the hero to use against the manifestation of Demise's hatred. The first time we see this legendary blade is actually the first game in the timeline, Skyward Sword. It starts out as the Goddess Sword, a weapon to be used by Hylia's chosen hero. Link must take this blade to 3 sacred flames housed in the Ancient Cistern, the Sand Ship, and the Fire Sanctuary, each time tempering the blade and increasing its power. First into the goddess's longsword, then the goddess's white sword, and finally into the legendary Master Sword that we all know and love, which is then used to defeat Demise, absorb his essence into the blade, before being placed into the pedestal of time within the sealed temple. After Skyward Sword, we don't really see the Master Sword for a couple of games, as Minish Cap and Four Swords are dealing with a different powerful weapon, the Four Sword. Next time we see the Master Sword is in Ocarina of Time. We find it housed within the Temple of Time, where it acts as a gateway to the Sacred Realm. The sage Rauru built the Temple of Time over the now ruined sealed temple to act as a barrier to the Sacred Realm, using the Master Sword as a sort of key. That's also why it's called the Temple of Time, as Rauru named it after the Gate of Time in the sealed temple. It's at this point that the story splits 3 ways. One that follows Link as he's returned to his original time by Zelda, known as the Child Timeline. One that follows the events that unfold after Link is sent back in time and leaves Hyrule with no hero, known as the Adult Timeline. And finally, the most infamous timeline, a what-if scenario where Link fails to stop Ganondorf and is defeated, known as the Fallen Hero Timeline. In the Adult Timeline, we see the Master Sword appear in the very next game of the series, The Wind Waker, where we find it under the Great Sea in a flooded Hyrule castle, being used to seal away Ganondorf's magic. Link takes the sword, defeats Ganondorf by thrusting it into his head and turning him into stone. Then, using the Triforce to wish all of Hyrule to be permanently lost beneath the waves, Master Sword included. In the Child Timeline, we see the Master Sword again in Twilight Princess, skipping over Majora's Mask. Here, we see the Blade of Evil's Bane in a similar spot to Ocarina of Time, placed within the pedestal of time within the Sacred Grove, the now ruins of the Temple of Time. This time, the Master Sword has the power to dispel the dark fog of the Twilight Realm. After saving the day again, Link returns the sword back to its pedestal within the Sacred Grove, and that's the last we see it in the Child Timeline. The Fallen Hero Timeline is a bit more confusing, to say the least, aided by the fact that most of the older games reside within this what-if scenario. First up is A Link to the Past, which Ocarina of Time was originally intended to be a prequel of. Here we find the Master Sword resting within the pedestal of time within the Sacred Grove, very similar to how it was found in Twilight Princess. That allows us to assume that the 2 sacred groves are the one and the same. The Temple of Time falls into ruin, and the Lost Woods reclaim the land, and in doing so, protect the blade in their own way. After Link of this era uses it to defeat Ganon in the Dark World, he places it back within the Sacred Grove to sleep again forever. Well, that was wishful thinking, as we see it again in the Oracle games, but the Zelda Encyclopedia claims that the Oracle's Master Sword isn't the real Master Sword, but we'll come back to that. So we don't see the Master Sword at all in all of Link's Awakening, Oracle of Seasons, or Oracle of Ages. The next time we see it pop up is in A Link Between Worlds, where it rests still within the Sacred Grove, presumably still from when the Link from A Link to the Past left it there. Again, the Link from this era uses it to defeat the Great Evil, this time Yuga, then returns the blade to its home. And that's the last we see it in the Fallen Hero timeline. But unlike the other branches, this isn't even close to the end of the timeline. We still have Triforce Heroes, Echoes of Wisdom, the original Legend of Zelda, and Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, with no Master Sword. As a matter of fact, we don't see the Master Sword again until Breath of the Wild, in an era so far flung in the future, all the other games are just known as myths. So, where did the Master Sword go all that time? It was with us the whole time, just not by name. You see, after Echoes of Wisdom, we go into the Golden Era, where the royal family of Hyrule is using the Triforce to bring prosperity to their kingdom. But all good things must come to an end, and in one generation the kingdom fell into decline. The king of the time had a son, who he doubted the worthiness of, so he hid the Triforce of Courage within the Great Palace and cast a spell on all of Hyrule that would one day make a crest appear on a young man worthy of wielding the Triforce of Courage. He told this secret only to his daughter, Princess Zelda. And upon ascending to the throne, the prince only inherits the Triforce of Power and Wisdom. A wizard tells him that his sister knows where the missing piece is, but she would not reveal her father's secret. Enraged by this, the wizard puts Zelda into a magical eternal sleep. Many years later, a revived Ganon attacks Hyrule and steals the Triforce of Power. Out of fear that Ganon would take the Triforce of Wisdom, the current Princess Zelda splits the Triforce of Wisdom into 8 pieces and scatters them throughout Hyrule. Here, we finally catch up to the original Legend of Zelda, where we are met with a Hyrule utterly destroyed. Hardly anything remains standing. Monsters are roaming every corner of the land, and the few remaining people we do see are hiding in caves. In this game, Link acquires 3 different swords, aptly named Sword, the White Sword, and the Magical Sword. I believe the Magical Sword to actually be the Master Sword, but a different name. Here's why. The kingdom's completely ruined, but this sword is given to you by an old man hiding in a grave, somewhere that Ganon would most likely not look for someone. The old man most likely felt that this sword has to have some kind of magic ability, even if he didn't know the complete details. Maybe even stories passed down throughout his family about an evil repelling blade. You also need to have 12 heart containers before he will give it to you, a requirement very reminiscent of Breath of the Wild's 13 heart requirements to pull the Master Sword from its pedestal. This also wouldn't be the first time we've seen the Master Sword lose its power, or even change shape. In The Wind Waker, Link must awaken 2 new sages and sing with them to re-empower the Master Sword's power to repel evil, and in doing so, return the sword to its iconic appearance. Finally, in Adventure of Link, we follow the same Link after he stays in Hyrule to help rebuild, and goes on a quest to find the Triforce of Courage. And he brings the Magical Sword with him on this journey. In A Link to the Past's Nintendo Player's Guide, we can see artwork of this Link from Adventure of Link holding the Master Sword as he leaves the sleeping Princess Zelda's chamber, proving that the Master Sword and Magical Sword are one and the same, and that finally concludes the Fallen Heroes timeline. But wait, I didn't forget. I said we'd come back around to the Oracle games and their fake Master Sword. I don't really like the idea of a sword being called out as Master Sword and not be the Master Sword. But the only real way for it to make sense to have it in the Oracle games in lands so far away from Hyrule is to move the Oracle of Seasons and Ages to the end of the Fallen Heroes timeline, taking place after Zelda 2. So following Zelda 2, the Master Sword would be passed down to someone as Link would eventually become too old to wield it. He would most likely have given it to Zelda for safekeeping, but we learn in the Oracle of Ages that a Seazora eventually comes in possession of it. The Link from Oracle of Ages goes 400 years into the past to meet a Zora who gives him a broken sword, which can then be taken to Patch to repair the blade into the Master Sword during the Linked game. The Linked version of the Oracle game also gives a fitting end to Ganon, who, after failing to resurrect him in Zelda 2, witches Kome and Kotake attempt to sacrifice Zelda to complete a ritual to resurrect Ganon, but it fails, and Ganon comes back as a mindless beast who is quickly dispatched by Link. I personally really like the idea of the oracles being last in the timeline, and it also allows the Master Sword to flow between the games much easier. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, subscribe if you haven't to make sure you know when new videos are added, and make sure to like the video so more people can find us here. Thanks for watching, and until next time, see ya!